Busyness Tribe. It's Dr. Caitlin here with Dr. Sonia and Dr. Mindy, and we're going to talk about, are you crazy or is it your hormones making you crazy? And the three of us just had this quick conversation before jumping on this podcast, and we've all had very similar stories, but very different stories at the same time, where we've honestly thought we were crazy. And was it our hormones or was it us going crazy? And that's what we're going to talk about, because we know we're not the only three women in the world who have or are feeling this way. So, Dr. Mindy, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so what started this whole conversation was that I've been on my hormone path, trying to fix my hormones for most of my 40s. And I like we talk so often, I'm always trying to go to that root cause, like why are things happening? So, for example, when I was 43, I've always been an amazing sleeper, but I started waking up in the middle of the night, like drenched. Like I had to get up and get my husband up to change the sheets. I remember actually taking a sleeping bag because I didn't want to wake him up to change the sheets, and get in the sleeping bag and then get in the wet bed because I was so drenched. So that never had happened to me before. I was a great sleeper. I'd never experienced a hot flash. And at the same time, I started getting a lot of depression, which also wasn't me. I'm a very optimistic person. I actually have so much empathy now for people who are clinically depressed and have had chemical imbalances, because it's so illogical. Like, everything in your life could be going great, but I was depressed. And that's when I found heavy metals. That was when I started doing heavy metals and really balancing those. And that took away so much. The sleep is nearly perfect now. I don't wake up with hot flashes each time I do another brain phase. My hot flashes are completely gone, and I'm 48. So that cleared up. But I've been asking you guys, it's the anxiety that's now really showing up for me. So, and it usually happens, it's I'll go along, I'm fine for 2 weeks, totally normal, my old optimistic self. And then the anxiety kicks in, and I'm yelling at my husband, and I'm yelling at my kids, and my positive mindset goes in the tubes for about a week. And I hate it. I hate it. Yeah. So I've been walking around going, oh my God, am I crazy? What's going on with me? So, and so you guys are talking about the low progesterone, that's a possibility. And that would make sense in my, what do you call it? The rushing woman syndrome.
The rushing woman syndrome. Yeah. That's classic case of low progesterone. And the rushing woman syndrome was coined by Dr. Libby Weaver. And she really goes into explaining progesterone being an anti-anxiety hormone for us. It's antidepressive. It's the one that actually helps us thrive. It regulates our entire system. So I think it is an epidemic that we're all facing as women. I would say 98% of the women that I see in my practice, because I mostly deal with hormones, it's all low progesterone. And there's so many different factors that affect it. And one of the ones that we talked about was cortisol, our stress hormone. Right? So when we're under these stressful situations, and if we're not, we don't have the time to balance our meditation life and yoga and, things that help to calm that nervous system or correct that HPA axis, progesterone is continuously being shunted into cortisol to get us going, to keep us going through the day. And I felt it the most for myself after my second born. After my first, I feel like he actually fixed my hormones and had these amazing periods every month. And the second one came around, and I was like, who is this person? It's almost like things start coming out of your mouth, and then there's voice behind you going, what are you doing?
Yes, yes. That's exactly it. Yes, that's exactly me. Last month I went off on my husband, who is such a loving, wonderful man.
Right.
And I'm I walked out of the room, I'm like, whoa, who was that?
Yeah. And that doom and gloom that, I think a lot of women are misdiagnosed with depression, but it's actually a hormonal issue that's going on. So I think there needs to be more awareness around that. But you don't feel like yourself, and it, and it's hard to understand where that's coming from. Yeah. So it's huge. I think we all face it at some point, some stage.
Well, and I think you said something really important, was that you know yourself better than anybody. And so when you know something's not right, you can go see a doctor and they'll tell you, oh, it's just because you're getting old, or, and I hate that. I
hate that too.
absolutely hate that.
Yeah.
It's not because you're getting old, it's because your system's not balanced. There's something going on. And the depression thing, there's a stat, or there's some research out there that thinks that 50% of all depression cases is actually due to a low functioning thyroid.
Yeah,
so that's hormone, but it's not quite the hormone we were talking about today. I just want to throw that out there. So if you guys are suffering with depression, go and get your thyroid checked. And it's not just TSH. It's so much more than that. So you got to find somebody who's actually fluent in thyroid and how it works and how it functions. But if you're suffering with depression, get your hormones checked.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Another one is testosterone. I think a lot of women don't understand what testosterone does for us. And that one is also very antidepressive. There's actually more receptors in our brain than anywhere else in the body. So knowing that, testosterones are like motivation, right? It's the one that gives us our libido, lean muscle, and that zest for life. And when that's missing, we feel depressed. And there's many different things that affect testosterone levels in women too.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've been really looking at my thyroid a lot recently. So I've done all the blood work on my thyroid. My thyroid's totally normal. I do blood work on myself once a year, but I didn't. The thing that popped up for me this weekend, and what started this conversation, was the progesterone. And when that goes down, the testosterone goes down too. And so I'm like, oh yeah, stress, rushing woman, okay. And I'm not. The other interesting thing, and I think you guys probably have this as well, is I'm not sure, my life is pretty packed. I'm not sure how I'm going to unpack it. So there needs to be, if the low progesterone because of stress, causes so many hormonal imbalances, then we need strategies on how to handle that other than slow your butt down, because I'm not sure I'm going to slow my butt down.
Yeah, I think this goes back to that conversation we had about balance, right? So it's life is there. Like when you have different things going on, whether it's your career or your kids or a relationship in general, there's so much going on that is not going to go away. But our relationship, our responses to it can shift. So when something new is going on, or there's a different stage in life that's showing up, really moving through it with grace, or as much grace as we can, with the right tools, and then just recognizing, right, when we're not feeling like ourselves in that moment, recognizing that we have to do something different. And we've talked, a little bit in the past about some of those tools, whether it's meditation or a gratitude journal or time to yourself, making that a priority, doing that daily thing that helps you feel like yourself will carry you through these other things that are going on when it comes to stress.
Absolutely.
I agree completely. And I think one thing that really helps too is when you're in that moment, catching yourself and just being okay with it, being fine with maybe you being totally irrational, or maybe you snapping at your loving husband, or losing it on your kids, and then being able to go back and apologize and say, that wasn't me. I'm so sorry. It wasn't directed at you. I was upset about whatever. It really helps the whole family or everybody who's involved be able to deal with it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, and then moving on from that, as women, we're good at remembering conversations and then playing them over and over again, and then feeling guilty about it. And then when, they've actually done studies where the emotion guilt produces more acid in our body. So we all know what an acidic environment can do. So that's huge. It's like what Dr. Caitlin said, recognizing it, being okay with it, allowing yourself to feel what you need to feel, apologize if you need to, and then move forward.
You actually, there are studies that you remember, you change your memory of it each time, and often the negative will actually get stronger and stronger and stronger. So the way you used to remember it, you just pulled out that negative piece and just magnified it. So yeah, totally agree. So okay, so here's a question I've asked myself, and I'm kind of curious for both of you what your response is, okay, so at 43 was the first time I started to see some significant hormonal change. I'm doing the heavy metal detoxing. I'm doing the ketogenic lifestyle. So, which I'd love to chat more about, like where I've started adding carbs in before my period a little bit more. You know, everything in our house is free of endocrine disruptors, even though I know we live in a world that is full of them. So I'm going to work on my stress. But then you go in your head, you're like, how long am I going to have to live like this? Like every time I have my period, there's like relief. It's like, okay, I'm going to be normal again. And then like right before, you know, a couple weeks before, I'm like, oh no, the crazy lady's back. Like it's just, it's painful. And I'm sure there's people who have it 10 times worse than I have it. And I've already done a lot of the work to balance them. But what, you know, as far as how long perimenopause takes and what we can do is there a corner that's going to turn at some point? I'm just curious from your professional opinions, what you see.
Yes. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Oh, no, go for it.
I was going to say, so some of the work that I've done with a lot of perimenopausal women is figuring out what the progesterone levels are at, right? So doing some blood work or doing a Dutch test or salivary. I know Dr. Caitlin uses a lot of salivary as well. So figuring out, you know, what the levels are and what the ratios are between the hormones and getting really specific. So there are specific herbs you can take. Some women even benefit from the bioidentical progesterone. I mean, I did for myself. Those women that know the day that you start feeling crazy, right? Those are the ones that would actually really do well with it. But then also educating at the same time, that isn't the full answer. It's going to give you some relief in this moment, but we still have to continuously peel the layers with detoxing, making sure the communication is happening in the cells, because perimenopause should not be uncomfortable.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. You know, progesterone starts to drop at age 25. It's kind of doing this slow decline, but then when we have these events happening, we get pregnant or there's, you know, other stresses happening in life, they start to dip more rapidly. So when we transition into perimenopause, it's harder for the body to deal with this transition now. So there's definitely things that you can do, whether it's, you know, taking the right herbs that are going to work on the pituitary gland or the adrenals and whatnot, maybe taking some bioidentical, taking the right nutrients in, that in itself should start to turn the corner faster. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I find some women have a much harder time going through menopause. And those tend to be individuals who have a whole lot more stress and toxins just that they've been exposed to, whether it started in utero or their career or where they live or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that I do, because I think it's so important to actually go off of what each individual person's dealing with and not just go off of symptoms, because there's so many different causes for symptoms. So I like looking at blood work. I like looking at saliva, and I'm really diving more into the Dutch test now to find out more like of the breakdown of the metabolites and things like that. But I can talk a lot more on the blood, like when to get certain blood tests done, and the saliva. And I know, Dr. Sonia, you can really talk wonders about the Dutch test and the blood work. So one thing that I always look at in blood work's a snapshot. Like, that's it. You can't determine everything that's going on just from blood work. So whenever I have somebody who has symptoms, whether it be the crazies, they're going crazy on a certain day of their period, or their cycle, or they have terrible cycles, or they're not cycling, or whatever it may be, I always run blood work on day 3. And depending on how long their cycle is, days 19 through 21. And we look at free testosterone, estradiol, sex hormone binding globulin, and then like FSH, LH. I'll look at prolactin one time just to see what the pituitary gland's doing. And then I'll do that again later on in the cycle to really find out, did they get that progesterone surge? Are they still getting the progesterone surge? And that can really help us figure out, you know, are they estrogen dominant, or are they, you know, converting all their estrogen into testosterone? Like, what's going on? And then you can use certain herbs or certain lifestyle changes to help shift that balance back.
Yep.
So that's what I usually like to start with, or the saliva, 24-hour saliva, to find out what free hormones are available, because blood is bound and saliva is free.
Yeah, the saliva one's also really great for cortisol and DHEA.
Yes.
Getting a handle on that to see what it's doing throughout the day. So looking at your circadian rhythm.
Right. Yeah.
And so what would you use? Why are you going to add the Dutch test in? I'm curious.
So Dutch, go ahead. Well, Dutch test gives you the metabolites, right? So what is your body using and what is it not using? And it also kind of gives you an idea about methylation as well, which I really like. And when you do the complete, you're also looking at cortisol throughout the day as well. So it kind of gives you that rhythm. So I find if you do the combination of all of those, you get a really complete picture. It's like what Dr. Caitlin said, the blood will give you a snapshot. In one moment, you can think about something else, and all of a sudden your numbers are, I mean, not that different, but slightly different. So,
or the time of day.
Time of day, exactly. What happened, how you slept the night before. There's so many different variables. I use blood more for safety gauge too. If I'm using bioidentical hormones, it gives me an idea of how I can use them. But it's not everything.
Right. Well, and I really like the saliva too, because just like you said, Dr. Sonia, it'll show me, are they overproducing cortisol, which means their DHEA is really low. And DHEAs are building blocks to our sex hormones. So just like you mentioned, what does our body think is more important? Sex drive or energy? 100 times over, it's going to be energy every time. And so libido goes down, sex hormones go down, and then that's when all these symptoms come in. And depending how your hormones are shifting and changing is going to relate to the symptoms that you're expressing. So I really love being able to put all of those together. Well, the blood and the saliva, like I said, I'm still learning about how to read the Dutch test and things like that. But that's why, or that's how I put together the whole puzzle, so that I can start utilizing specific herbs to really help that individual get into a better place.
So I listened to a really interesting podcast this weekend where a microbiologist was talking about the power of the gut over hormones. And he was saying that 90% of our hormones are actually produced in our gut. Now, I don't know, he's the first person I've ever heard say that. Curious your opinion on that. And then he talked about, and Sonia, you mentioned this a little bit in a Vox you sent me earlier, which is that the gut produces enzymes that break estrogen down. So if your gut is off, then you're not going to break estrogen down as easily. Is that what you guys have noticed? Where does the gut play a part? And then my other a really interesting rabbit hole I ended down is that they're starting to look at very specific strains that can have an influence on moods. It's called, you guys know, it's about psychobiotics. Really interesting what I learned there. But let's start with the first. Where do you see the gut playing the part?
Yeah, anytime you see estrogen dominant picture, there's usually a history of constipation.
Do you want to explain what estrogen dominant is for the listeners?
Yeah. So when you think about, your progesterone has fallen, like I like to call it. So estrogen dominant means we have estrogen in our body. There's different types, right? There's estradiol, there's estriol, which is high when you're pregnant, and there's estrone, which can have its bad forms, right? And then there's the estrogens that come in from the environment, which are the xenoestrogens from our plastics, from our pesticides, our water because of birth control pill. So many different areas we get progesterone from the environment. But it's the liver's and the gut's job to break that estrogen down and get rid of it. Or else it's going to cycle itself through the blood again. And somehow your body knows that that's not the right estrogen that we want. So at the end of the month, when we're bleeding, you'll probably notice heavier bleeds, maybe more clots, maybe more breast tenderness. So those are kind of symptoms of that estrogen dominant state where your body's not breaking it down. So now there's a bigger gap between your progesterone and your estrogen, where you're not getting that curve that you need or that spike that you need, bringing on the crazies.
Right.
Yeah.
And estrogen dominant women tend to have more of the craziness, that anxiety, that like doom and gloom, depression, that kind of stuff associated with really high amounts of estrogen.
Yeah. Yeah. So progesterone's really shown to stabilize the gut too, because it's helping with our tight junctions. So it's helping in that detoxification process. So when it's getting diminished, again, then gut's not worse. So it's like chicken or egg thing here. You don't know if it's a progesterone causing the gut to slow down or if it's a gut causing the progesterone. But like Dr. Mindy said, there's certain enzymes that are going to help break down estrogen, like glucuronidase is one of the main ones. And the only way it's going to leave is through the gut. So if you're not having good bowel movements every day, you're not getting enough fiber in, the gut's inflamed, your hormones are not doing what they need to do.
Right. What are some easy things that people can do to increase the glucuronidase and just to get things moving before diving into like specific herbs that can be really strong or a little bit more specific?
Yeah, I'd say fiber is huge, right? So you're making sure you're having the good bowel movements. Liver-friendly foods, so greens, eat your greens. Lemon water, simply just doing something like that. Cruciferous vegetables have certain extracts that help to break down estrogens as well. So really, I mean, the diet that we've been talking about, organic.
Yeah. And so that's what's so surprising to me, because there's so many different pieces here that connect here. So if like somebody like me who eats impeccable, I mean, I mean that only because you guys, I know you guys eat impeccable too. Like I'm so obsessed with eating well. So then, but then if you're stressing, you're causing a leaky gut because you're stressing. Yeah. So then there's like, okay, well, I gotta handle that piece. There's got to be some kind of management over there. But if you're stressing and causing a leaky gut, and that's affecting your breakdown, how you break down estrogen, which is giving you the crazies, but then it's hard to stop stressing when you've got the crazies. Like, do you know, it's like that cycle is like, whoa, that's where do you enter in? So
I think part of it too, as women, and I'm just going to talk for myself, I'm one of those people where when I make my mind up on something, I'm doing it, this is happening, this is how it's going to go. I know exactly how I'm going to go from A to B. Like my husband and I, ever since graduating, every 3 years, even less than that, every 2.5 years, we open up a new practice. And, you know, so the stress level that we're constantly under, even though I don't normally feel stressed per se, I know that's absolutely 100% playing a role and a toll on my hormones and why my estrogens and testosterones are off. And we'll talk about me and my hormones on a whole other day, because I don't fall into normal patterns. Like I've had like MDs who like specialize in functional medicine looking at my labs going, yep, I don't know what's going on here. You're not estrogen dominant. You're not testosterone dominant. You have a normal progesterone. So we'll talk about me later, but it has to do with having to control everything for me and expecting things to happen when I want them to happen. And so I think part of it is releasing some of that control, right? Being okay with things not being perfect or things not happening when you want them to happen or immediately or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think what you touched on is really important. One thing I tell women to do also is when the crazies are there, what is it that's making you crazy? Like really tune into every month what is going on that's triggering you. And if it's a common theme, it's something that your body is telling you to look at. Because when we have our bleed, when we have the period, it's very cleansing physically, but it's also an emotional cleanse. When you think back to like the village days and women coming together, most women would have been bleeding at the same time and doing something nourishing with one another. Their cycle probably mimicked the moon cycle as well. So there's a real energetic thing going on there, and it's all about cleansing the entire system. So if there's something that's been bugging you or something going on in your relationship or work or whatever it is and you haven't addressed it, something will tell you next month that that's still there. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to look at it. And I would agree with, I totally resonate with the control freak is what I would call that. No, you know, take that with love, Caitlin, but that's what I've got. She lives in me.
I've embraced it.
And it's
Okay.
absolutely, it's too many moving parts that you can't control,
Yeah.
and you just have to learn to let it go.
Yeah.
I think that those were really wise words. But that I find that's where it's when things get out of control. Because one of the things that happens to me is that I become during this time a clean freak, and I'm not normally a clean freak. I'm fine with the kids like putting their backpacks on the floor or whatever. But when all of a sudden the crazies kick in, it calms me if everything is clean around me and everybody's behaving the way I want them to behave,
Hmm.
which is nearly impossible when you have two teenagers in the house.
Right.
But it's interesting how that works.
I
You
have a
just,
question for you, Dr. Mindy.
yeah.
When you have the crazies, do you only have the crazies towards your family, or do you have the, no, because I
Good
think
question.
that's a question for most women. Or do you
Yeah.
have it towards other people? You just might not take it out on them.
Perhaps.
What is
Yeah.
it that you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so for sure it's aimed at my family, and it's old, and I agree with what you said, Sonia. It's old patterns that show up. So, so I'm actually working with a life coach, and she's a performance coach / life coach. She does a lot of NLP stuff, and she's kind of helping me. We should bring her on sometimes. Her name's Katie. I work with her. I send a lot of my patients to her. So she kind of helps me figure out the pattern, and that has helped. That totally has helped.
Yeah.
But I think, again, in our household, I've got one that's about to go off to college. There's just, the kids are growing up and they're kind of moving out. And I think that's a unique place of motherhood that I'm at.
Yeah.
So it feels very out of control because they're on their own trajectories. And so maybe the yelling at them is trying to bring it into control.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And today's day too, it's different than what it was before. Most women in the past generations were having kids maybe in early 20s.
yeah.
That's not the case anymore, right? So when we're going through these different transitions, we're a bit older, so we're going through this like reflective period. Really now is the time to start reflecting back into our own life.
Yeah.
And what we've done and whatnot, but we're still raising young kids, or wanting to have kids, or having kids that are going off to college, but our physiology is saying something else and telling us,
Right.
what about you? Like, now's your time, right? So I think there's, a lot of that going on too for women today.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, you guys just made me think that, there is something very, it feels instinctual as a mother to want to keep my baby cubs close to me. And so the fact that they're spreading their wings, even though they're teenagers, is a very weird physiological experience that I've never experienced at this level. You spend your whole life protecting them, making sure they don't run into the street. And then you realize there comes a time that you can't protect them anymore. Yeah. So interesting that would tie into my periods. And into my cycles. There's definitely something to be looked at there. Yeah.
I think, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I also think that you feel what they feel. So, your daughter going off to college, you're probably feeling a lot of her transition too.
Could be.
And what she's feeling. I mean, they did a study in New Zealand where they looked at, or I don't know how they tagged like the Y chromosome to see what was kind of left behind in mothers after she had already given birth. And they actually saw that the fetal tissue was merging into like the lungs or merging into the heart. So they physically literally leave parts of them in you. So that mother instinct and that feeling that you feel knowing what they're going through at certain times of their life is very real. It's very physical.
Yeah. Wow.
Is that also with the Y chromosome, or is that also with...
No, it is with the X. It is with daughters too, but they only tag the Y just so they can see the difference between moms and then the males. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm curious your opinion. We chatted a little bit about this too. One thing that I've been experimenting with and finding a lot of research on is CBD oil. Mm-hmm. That has helped tremendously. So I don't know if you guys have any personal experience with it or if you used it with your patients, but I'm really finding that calms everything.
So we don't do a whole lot of CBD oil in our practice. Like, I don't sell it per se. I do like CBD oil. For me, I'm one of those people where I need to know all the ins and outs about everything before I'm going to start to prescribe it to somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell them like, this is what you're going to take and this is how it's going to work. I need to know how it's going to work. But one thing I love about CBD is the endocannabinoid system. We're just covered in it. And from what I've read thus far, our endocannabinoid system is just, it's stressed just like everything else. And so I think what happens is the CBD calms that stressed system down. And I can definitely see how that could help restore balance to things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak personally from it. I'm contemplating taking some myself. I used it for my Great Dane for cancer. And it was amazing, totally amazing. So I love it. I'm a believer. I don't know too much about it. How about you, Dr. Sonia? Do you?
Yeah, same. We're actually not allowed to give it away, give it out to patients. So I haven't used it with any patients, and I haven't used it myself yet. And like Dr. Caitlin, I need to kind of sink my teeth into it first before giving it out or giving advice on it. But those that tell me they have used it, I've seen some really great things, and mostly nervous system. So if you're calming your nervous system down, your cortisol is coming down, so progesterone's getting a chance to do what it needs to do. So I can see how that would work.
Yeah.
The system.
Yeah. And that's what, so what I know about it and what I've been experimenting with is that there's CBD1 and there's CBD2 receptors in your body. CBD1 is the nervous system and CBD2 is more the immune system. And so this is what we're seeing in our office is that what ends up happening is when people take CBD, it's like putting the brake on the sympathetic nervous system. Like it just calms everything down. In fact, I gave it to my teenage daughter. She started taking it. She told me the other day, she goes, strangely, I feel a little more zen. And that is exactly, and it's not when you're taking it. This is what I love about it is that, yes, you can feel calm when you're taking it, but it continues the calm. Like the calm continues, which is for days afterwards if you consistently take it. Okay. Now, what we are finding is that if you're a very neurotoxic person, those metals can hang out in the receptor sites for CBD. And then those are the people that take it and say, oh, I don't notice anything. Because there's metals. I mean, it's like almost like everything comes back to those darn metals sometimes, right?
Yeah, the communication.
Yeah. So it's really, I'm really enjoying it. And you know what, the research I've done on it is that there's CBD from hemp and there's CBD from marijuana. And I know people are still freaked out about marijuana, which is hysterical because at least in California, it's like totally legal now. And same thing. Yeah.
Colorado. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the psychoactive part of it. That's just not, talk about feeling out of control.
Right.
That's a whole nother level of out of control I do not want. But if we're using Charlotte's Web is the one that we really like, and it's from hemp, and it's amazing. I really recommend it.
Yeah, we've the thing about the marijuana or the CBD from marijuana, there's CBD and THC. It's the THC that gives you that psychedelic or that what's the word?
It's like an altered
state. Yeah.
And so CBD from marijuana doesn't do that. It's just CBD, just like from hemp. But yeah, Charlotte's Web is a great brand. And Quicksilver is another one.
Yeah, we've used that one too.
Really, really good. I love the research behind it. The guy who developed it is a genius, and I could listen to him talk for hours, just like I could listen to Shane Morris talk for hours. But no, I think it's a good option to try. I don't know though if it will balance out like progesterone and things like that, but it might help switch the stress over.
That's what I'm thinking.
The problem or the stressor off of your adrenal glands. So going back to the HPA axis, so hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, it could help to calm things down so that you could, become more zen-like and not be in that go mentality.
Yeah.
And what do you think about
the mindset?
What do you think about alcohol? Because alcohol, can do that to chill you out, but then it can also throw your hormones off. So curious what your thoughts are on alcohol.
Well, when you think about what alcohol is doing to the liver, right? It's tasking the liver, and the liver's biggest job is to regulate your hormones and convert them.
Right.
So if your liver now has alcohol to deal with, it's not going to deal with the hormones. So the energy is shifted over here, and alcohol in itself is a depressant. So yes, you might not feel anxious, but now you're going to feel depressed. So
I agree completely. And like you said, the liver is a big component in not just converting your E1 to E2 and your E2 to E3 and back and forth. Maybe what I'll do is I'll actually do like a little drawing to show the difference between estradiol, estrone, and estriol. Going through those, that's what your liver does. And so it gets rid of that bad E1, which can become cancerous. It can be converted into other estrogens. And so when it's being taxed with other things like alcohol, it can even be taxed, though, not just with alcohol, with caffeine. So could coffee be a problem? It could.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things that could contribute, but I don't tell people to go, have a beer to relax and de-stress.
To calm themselves. Yes, exactly.
Well, it's like, some people are using coffee to wind up and then wine to wind down. So just thinking about that aspect too, if that's a daily occurrence, what that's kind of doing to your liver and the estrogen balance.
And then another interesting thing I saw was there is a strain of bacteria called L. reuteri, REUT. You know it? Okay. The wheat belly guy, he wrote a book called Undoctored. So he figured out that if you take that strain of bacteria, it's in a probiotic. It's actually in Themicrin from Systemic, because I started doing some research on that. And you put it in cream and you make yogurt out of it, that it has a mood enhancing effect. And that something about taking a probiotic and turning it into yogurt, a specific strain, can also help with lifting your moods. So, and that, I know. So I'm going to try it. I'll post the recipe on the Women in Wellness Facebook page. So it's super easy to make. I'm going to do it in an Instant Pot. And it supposedly is a great way to eating it every day to get the right bacteria that lifts your moods. So to be continued. That's another path I thought about taking.
Interesting.
So,
I can't wait till the psychobiotic comes out and everything gets balanced out with that. That will be something where we'll talk about gut and brain and serotonin and how those all play into one of another, because when one's off, you're going to have problems elsewhere, like depression, anxiety, all of that. We do a ton of gut testing in my office, and what I'm dreaming for, what I'm like looking for, is this test will tell you what bacteria you're high in, what bacteria you're low in. But we don't have the ability to be like, here, eat this yogurt, take this exact probiotic, do this exact thing to make these go up. We just have general ideas on more fiber, more prebiotics. I love the MBC from Systemic. Like it's more general, but I want it to be specific. Like that's what I'm hoping we get to with the microbiome someday.
Well, Metagenics, I don't know if you guys use them at all, but they actually have started coming out with more specific strains.
Awesome.
There's even one for weight loss. There's one for the gut-brain connection. There's just a women's one. There's an acute one for diarrhea. So they've actually gone and done a little bit of that. It's not as extensive as it could be, but they're starting to get there.
It would be really cool if you did a test and then they could formulate specific probiotics for that individual.
Right? That would be amazing.
Right?
For this period of time. But the other problem too is normally when your probiotics are off, it's because the bad stuff's way up. And so you got to get the bad stuff out in order for the good stuff.
Right.
Anyway,
that's a whole other talk.
That's another talk. That's a whole. We've gotten into trying using phages. I don't know if you guys use phages, but I'm now like geeked out down that road that Systemic Formulas has. So, interesting. My just like heavy metals, I feel like I always come back to the gut. Like I feel like all roads lead back to the gut.
Always.
It's crazy. It's so.
So what are some takeaways now we can give the women about the crazy hormones? and some simple things that they can do now. What are some things that you're going to start doing now, Mindy? Yeah.
Well, okay, so I can tell you right away, after my last go around with my cycle, I'm back to my meditation practice. So start the morning with meditation. I think that's important. The other thing I'm experimenting with is really upping my carbs right before my period, like 2 weeks. We've talked a little bit about that. I've been pretty ketogenic, but I'm trying to up those, sweet potatoes, wild rice, a little more beans, things like that. So I've been experimenting with that. And yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's really stress. I really am slowing down and letting go and stop trying to control. Like, I think for me, if I just mastered that, the crazies would go away. Because I really, that's that for me. I think that's such a big piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you figure out how to master that, let me know. Because that's definitely something that I've been working on, is understanding that not everything is in my time. Sometimes what our time frame isn't what is planned out for us. You just have to be okay with it. Taking action steps, though, you can't just sit there and wait for something to come out. You have to take action steps towards it, but not being frustrated behind the journey going there, right? The whole process. And so that's really what I've been working on. But truthfully, for me, the biggest thing has been getting the appropriate testing done to truly find out what is going on. So finding somebody that's willing to do the appropriate blood test on the appropriate days, and then tying in either saliva or the Dutch test so that you can really dive in and get to the underlying cause. So adding those green vegetables and the cruciferous vegetables to help clear the bad hormones, but then being able to support that system and rise up or help bring up your progesterone or bring down your testosterone with the appropriate herbs. So testing.
Yeah, I think both of you touched on really important things. The mindset with the meditation, all the tools that we have to work on our stress levels, the foods we're eating, making sure we're eating organic, we're eating the right things for us. And I think what Dr. Mindy said was key about women that are doing the intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet, figuring out which time of cycle you do need to carb load, because we do need those carbs. We need more cholesterol to make our hormones too. So really it comes down to listening, right? Listening to your body. When your gut is off, what do you need to do now to shift that? If that crazy voice is there, what is the voice actually telling you? And maybe it's something really important that we've been pushing aside for a long time. So just paying attention and being graceful to yourself and allowing yourself to feel what you need to do and giving yourself time for you. Because I think that's kind of huge, because we are juggling a lot of things all the time. And they're great things too. They're great things that pull us, right? They're great things that we love to do. But I know I don't feel like myself if I don't give myself that time, or don't meditate, or don't eat well, because then guilt is huge. And so, just letting go.
That ups the stress. Then the guilt ups the stress.
Yeah. Just go back to that. What's that song from Frozen? Let it go. Just, start playing that in your mind over and over again. Let go.
Yeah. And I also think the variation, what you were talking about, I just think we need to, I would love a diet where we're just always varying, like based off of our cycle. So maybe you do keto right as you start to bleed, and then the next week you start to build up with carbohydrates. Like somebody needs to create a diet like that.
Yeah. Well, I think if you, like I was saying, if you just listen to your body, it tells you. Like I know when I'm cycling, I don't need to eat that much. I know I can fast. I can do that right after, a bit more keto. And then all of a sudden day 14, 15, 16 hits. Okay, got to up those carbs, right? It's happening. So just listening to what's going on.
I think what would be really beneficial is for us to post some, so when this podcast goes live, go into our Facebook page, and under the podcast, we'll post good carbs, right? Because when we're talking carbs, we're not talking breads and donuts and cookies and those kinds of
oh God, no.
Carbs we're talking about. So we'll list off carbs, and that's going to be in the closed Facebook group, Women in Wellness. And then the other thing that I was going to post, and Dr. Sonia, maybe you can help me with the Dutch test, posting the specific test that you guys can get done to find out where your hormones are. So that can give you some at least guidance. But the big thing is find a doctor that knows how to read it.
Yes.
You know, for myself, I don't even look at my own blood work because as doctors, I can't be objective with myself. So I have another doctor look at it for me and tell me what to do. So it's that important that you find a doctor to tell you exactly what to do so that you can get the results you get.
Yeah.
But with that being said, find us on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, share it.
Yes.
And am I forgetting anything?
Download the podcast.
There we go.
Yeah.
I one last thing, and then we can stop talking. But I find this topic fascinating. What I'm doing is I'm actually taking like a list of like, here are vitamin C foods that would fit in, because vitamin C, vitamin E, L-arginine, fiber, like things that will help bring up progesterone. I'm going to make a list of them for my community and do them according to like, these are lower on the glycemic, these are higher. So, and play with introducing some of these foods, like make sure people are getting enough, like potatoes is on there. And what about like oranges? Oh my God, like a keto, people run from oranges, but, but maybe 2 weeks before your period, you need more oranges. So I'm trying to, when I get that list, I'll post it on the group as well. Cause I think it would be fun to kind of pick from those foods and look at it like, I am feeding my hormones now. It's like, instead of always taking something away, I'm actually going to feed this my body good so that it can build the right hormones.
Absolutely.
Well, let me know if I can help you out with that, because B vitamins, zinc, and magnesium, those are all so important too.
Yes, very important. B6. Yay.
Yeah, I have a whole list, so I'll send it to you, and then you guys can add it in. So yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because there'll be a lot of crossover too between foods and the vitamins, so minerals.
Cool. Well, you guys are awesome. I could talk about this for hours. I think
know.
It's so interesting, and I think so many women are going through it, and then they get just told, "Here's some Prozac." So it's I think when you stay committed, the what I love about where my mindset is with it is that I'm 100% clear there's no medication option. That's just not the path. There's too many other things I can try. So, and I'm definitely, nobody's ever going to put me on a Prozac. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Good.
Good for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.